Amid the chaos of battle, a startling truth emerges. Most soldiers hesitate to kill, revealing a profound psychological struggle between survival instincts, moral conscience, and the haunting cost of taking a life. In this almost certainly not companion series, we examine each episode's origins, production process, behind the scenes, personal thoughts, and most likely go off on some tangents in spite of our best efforts. In this episode, we examine Hold Your Fire, the moral dilemma of shooting to kill. I'm Layla Lawrence.
And I'm Dan Lauer.
And this is Possibly Not. So Dan, this is where we normally start to talk about what inspired the article and kind of backstory on the original article itself. But I feel like we cannot get into this without acknowledging how wild this ride has been since we released the first episode, the Sandra episode on YouTube. I know we've talked about it so much behind the scenes, but I feel like it bears mentioning here as well. Like, what is happening?
Yeah, I have told
what
you.
What is happening?
I don't know. As we're, do you have it in front of you? What are the numbers as we speak?
I can pull them up in front of me.
And we're recording this on 19 December 2024. So as of this
and
moment.
Also bearing in mind, we released the first episode on the 1st of December. Yeah. December 1, as you like to say. So I'm pulling up the channel. It's gone up by 100 since I looked literally 15 minutes ago, if it was even that.
What happened?
So I'm on the Almost Certainly Not page on YouTube, and we are currently sitting at what is this, 12:39 Central Time. We're currently sitting at 3.07 thousand subscribers. We have 18. I don't know if it will show me more specifically on here. I don't think it will. No, it doesn't. We have 18,000 views on Waiting to Inhale, the Breatharian video, which was released 10 days ago, with 303 likes. And then on Electric Blue, we have also got 18,000 views. It was released 2 weeks ago. That was the one that was released on December 1st. And we have 1.7 thousand likes on it.
It's insane.
And we did drop a Patreon episode on there as well.
We did.
Which has far less views, but it's also an hour long. And as I have said previously to you, will probably only appeal to certain deranged people who want to listen to an hour of us just like bantering back and forth.
I think, yes, those numbers are insane. I think that the thing that this eventuality was the only one that I was unprepared to deal with. I was prepared to be satisfied by a couple hundred views, maybe 100 subscribers for several months. I was going to be disappointed if the number was 0, or maybe like 5, which would be me, you, and everybody I know. So this was I don't know. I think it's satisfying to me in exactly one way, which is that the thing that we didn't focus group it. We didn't research it. We didn't ask people what they wanted to see. And something seems to be happening. So people are watching it and we're doing our thing. So that makes
that was very specifically something we discussed. We kind of talked about showing it to people, and we did show it to a few people, and we got some feedback, some of which we implemented. And I think it just got to the point where we were like, look, if we both like it, just put it out. Like, it's just, we're both...
I didn't implement
fairly
any,
like
any
oh
of
okay
those.
well
Zero.
we're both fairly most of the time functioning individuals who have worked
that's
in
an
this
interesting thing for you to say at the moment.
People who've worked in this space in one aspect or another for many, many years. So, I mean, if neither one of us is feeling any like red flags about something, there's no point in not posting it. I did kind of expect to feel I think at first I was really focused on the numbers and I was kind of checking them just because I was so shocked about the subscriber count going so wild.
Yeah.
I was checking it a lot, and I feel like I've just kind of settled into this place now because I feel like it was feeling like a bit of pressure at first, and I've kind of settled into a place now where I'm like, okay, well, we're still going to do what we've been doing, and it's, you know, it's not,
I think what's
not going to
interesting is
alter the
that
course of what we're doing.
I just feel pressure because I'm doing all the cutting and assembly on my side. So I think what's interesting is that even though I am the admin on the YouTube channel, I have access to all the analytics, and you don't, just because you're not logged into that account, is that you, even though I check less frequently than you have been, because you are the one who's been making me aware of what the numbers are. And you're right, there was a time where like every morning or every afternoon, I would wake up to a text or get a text from you that was just a number disconnected from any context. 500, 750, 1,000.
Yeah.
So it's good. I mean, I feel like,
but it's pretty cool though. I mean, I
is.
certainly didn't expect it to go like this as well, and not to downplay it. It is wonderful, but it also it doesn't change what we're doing. It doesn't change the fact that I just enjoy working with you, and we enjoy working together and doing this. But it's pretty cool. So I didn't really want to like get into this episode without kind of acknowledging that, because this might be the only time that we acknowledge that. So
Yeah,
I just
don't
thought
know.
it bared some mentioning.
Yeah, maybe there will be certain milestones that we'll reach that are important. And well, I don't know. No artist produces work that they want to keep in a closet on a shelf. Why do we do this? For people to see it and hopefully
Yeah.
enjoy it. Or if they don't enjoy it, even if it makes them angry, that's fine by me, because at least now they're thinking about the thing that we're talking about. Some reaction. So
and as a segue, I think this episode might make some people angry. I think that's kind of why I've been a little bit on tender hooks about this one.
Well, I've just so obviously we're talking about Hold Your Fire. Anybody who's made angry by it is misunderstanding it, and so I'm not going to care.
Well,
and I could even tell you. Well, I was going to say I could tell you what people will be angry about in advance is that they're going to misassociate or misunderstand the thing that we're actually talking about. The phenomenon of this and the statistic of this with the concept of cowardice, which doesn't appear in the episode and has nothing to do with what I'm talking about,
I think
that we are talking about.
It's also going to be heavily influenced by the climate of the United States at the moment, certainly. Yeah. And it is, like you said, it's no disrespect to anyone in the armed services, anyone who has served, anyone who is serving. It's literally just facts and figures. Yeah. And it's nothing to do with cowardice or not being able to do one's job or any of those things. I mean, I have a decent amount of respect for people who are in the military and who have been in the military. I think it is a job, just like anything else is a job. And these are kind of the findings of the psychological aspects of that job. But how did you even come across? This is not something that I've ever really looked into. It's not something that I've ever even really heard about. So where did you first sort of hear about these findings, and how did it sort of inspire you to write your original article?
I actually have a specific answer to this, which is that I am a fan of well, I was thinking about this before we started recording this, which is I must just have a natural and maybe unjustified affection for British people with a British or English accent who are a little manic in their delivery. because there's you, obviously.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
But there's a man who has a YouTube channel. I think his name is Lloyd, but the YouTube channel is called Lindy Beige, and he's a very, very interesting person. He does a lot of archaeology. He does a lot of military stuff. He's also very into like Dungeons and Dragons and cosplay and
Cannot relate.
But he owns it all. He owns it all with such fervor, and he will do these very, very long extemporaneous videos where he'll do a lot of research, but he has this manic delivery where he can't help but go off on these tangents. And when I say tangents, he'll be talking about a thing, it'll remind him of another thing, and then he'll spend 25 minutes on this tangent and then be like, where was I? So
genuinely have no idea what you're talking about. I've never done that before in my life.
So I really like him. I like working with you. So just like manic sounding people who can't focus with an English accent, I just have a lot of affection for them, I guess. It's just my... But anyway.
I mean, it's very timely considering this literally comes on the heels of what was an hour-long therapy session we just had, basically. Yeah. Where it was me talking about one thing and then completely going off on a tangent.
Yeah.
That's what you first heard about. Is that what you heard about Charles and his findings was from this guy?
Charles?
Isn't the guy's name Charles, the guy who did the original...
SLA Marshall?
Sure, yeah, Marshall. Charles Marshall? Charles? His name was not Charles?
No, it's SLA Marshall.
Well, Charles sounded like a good name, so I just put it in there.
We'll call him Charles.
Okay.
Well,
Marshall.
I have watched a number of his videos, and this was one where it was the same basic concept, but I actually remember coming upon this when I was writing a lot of articles, and I watched up to the point where he said, well, speaking of, he said SLA Marshall, he started with World War II, and he said SLA Marshall conducted a study where he found, and then I closed the video, and I was like, okay, I've got that, it's a surprising, like, why wouldn't soldiers shoot to kill? I have this name SLA Marshall. I don't know what he's going to say. I've never watched the rest of that video because I didn't want to be
So you
influenced.
just decided to completely fuck his watch hours there. You were just like, I'm not gonna.
Well, I said, that's really interesting to me. I don't want to just ape his content. I don't know what I'll find down my path of research. Maybe the same, maybe different. But that was the inspiration for the idea. I really enjoy his channel, so I felt okay. It was like, I don't know, I guess the kids would say shout out.
Go on then. Shout out.
So it's Lindy, Lindy Beige. And he does, I don't know. I've enjoyed his content over the year. But this was one specifically I was like, that's a really interesting idea. It's something that I've heard bits and pieces of in the past, but more about sort of the ratio of ammunition expended versus confirmed enemy kills is astounding and astronomical. And I wondered why that is. And he just wet my whistle for that. And so I went and did the research about independently about SLA Marshall's findings, people who agree with him, people who disagree with him. And then it made me think, well, I'll tell you what, that this was on a different track, and it's still something that I may do. But I was thinking, I started to do research, and then it got me wondering, which we touched on in the episode about, is this reluctance, this just like base human, most people, it's not innate to them to kill someone else, to murder someone else, or to kill someone else even in the heat of battle. It's sort of an antithetical or anathema to most people's nature, even if they are forced to do it. I mean, even cops who someone points a gun at them and they shoot them, they have panic attacks. And I mean, it's not, even people who are trained to do it, it's still really difficult to do. So I'm not saying it's cowardly. I'm not saying that being in the military or being a police officer or whatever you want to choose, somebody who may be forced to use deadly force, it's not an easy thing. It's a hard thing. And I think that there's nothing shameful about it being a hard thing. I think it's sort of innate.
I think
but it got me thinking about,
it's
is
also
this
one
a
of
new
those things
phenomenon?
that,
do we know anything about what it was like in ancient warfare, especially because it was so much more up close and personal that obviously it's difficult to take contemporary philosophy and morality and shift it one to one back to ancient civilizations, the Spartans or the Romans or the Greeks or even the Persians. I mean, it's not a one-to-one thing, but people were still people. And so I wondered if there was any data about that. There is, and we include some of it in the episode, but mostly less from the perspective of like personal accounts of soldiers who, like a legionnaire who didn't want to kill somebody. Because like your average legionnaire didn't write anything down in ancient Rome. They didn't leave anything behind necessarily. But we do know that they were, that just from a practical perspective, because you don't want to lose your men, your soldiers. They're expensive to train. They're expensive to transport. They're expensive to feed. It was a much bigger thing to move an army from A to B. I mean, all you could do is march and maybe have some horses. So soldiers were at a premium. So there is the idea that it was more, if you can intimidate the opposition off the field without having to kill anybody or just get them to surrender, that was preferable to murdering all of them. But I was introduced to the idea, and this article almost became an article about post-traumatic stress disorder that soldiers suffer from. Obviously today we know a lot more about it and to what extent that exists in ancient times. And I still may do that, but I decided to focus more on this idea that even a well-trained soldier who has gone through basic training and maybe specialized training and are really try to have that part of their humanity beaten out of them to a certain extent, still find it difficult to level their weapon at another human being, aim directly at them, and pull the trigger to kill them. It's still difficult based on these numbers.
I think this is one of those things that, from the outside looking in, people may have very strong feelings about this, and they may not understand kind of the psychological ramifications of this. I think it's one of those things, it's like you don't know until you're in that situation. Because, I mean, even for myself, you keep saying murder, and I mean, I don't know that I find killing someone in a war, I don't know if it is akin to murder for me, especially, I mean, obviously if it's not a civilian, if it is like an enemy soldier or something like that. Well, I don't know that I would classify it as murder. And I think that's one of those things. I've never done this before. I'd never shot someone in war before or in any way before. And I think it might be something that I feel like all humans have it in them. And I think from the outside looking in, I don't really fully understand why someone wouldn't be able to do that. But I think it's certainly one of those things where until you are in that situation, you can never like fully understand.
I'm assuming that you're not wrong. I did catch myself saying murder, and I tried to adjust it. I hope I didn't say it too many times, because murder is really, it's a legal classification for what type of a homicide it was. So I don't think that it's murder necessarily either, but just as a stand-in for the act of killing another human being.
Yes.
So I'll be more specific about that. I would be the people whose opinions about this I would be most interested in, if somebody's going to have a very strong opinion, is somebody who has been in a situation where they're facing off with the enemy and had to aim a weapon at them, at their head, and know that when I pull this trigger, their head is going to explode. I'm going to see that happen. But this is not, I mean, basically what this is saying, and there's going to be outliers, is if 85% of soldiers are reluctant to aim their weapon to shoot at all, or or to subconsciously, deliberately aim high or aim low or aim to the side, or do sort of, I mean, what the Romans or the ancients would do, which is to to scream and beat their shields and make themselves look big and intimidating and say, like, you really want to face off? Do you really want to do this? Or maybe it would be better for you to just turn around and run, and then, no, I don't want to die either. That shooting, suppressive fire or covering fire, which is basically just, there's the enemy over there, we want to do something, shoot wildly in their general direction, they're going to put their heads down because they don't want to get shot.
Yeah.
So we're not trying to kill them specifically, but we're trying to suppress them and make them go away for a minute so we can do what we need to do. But that means that if, let's say that number, let's give it the benefit of the doubt. Let's say a full 50% of soldiers, this is broad, right? Let's just throw numbers out here and play devil's advocate. A full 50% of soldiers will never fire their weapon to kill someone. They'll always subconsciously or consciously aim a little high, aim a little low, shoot them in the leg to wound, but not to kill. That means that 50% will. So there is I think it's a person to person thing. And there's a concept in, even people who, I think one of the most interesting concepts I didn't really include directly in the episode, but that I came upon when I was reading, and I think it makes all the sense in the world, is a sniper, right? A sniper is sort of a self-sustained unit who needs to be a very special type of person because they are not, well, maybe more recently, and I don't know about this because communication has gotten so much better, but they're not being ordered necessarily to kill a specific person. If they're like, they have to make their own decision. And I think that in some of my research I did, that a lot of people are technically proficient enough at firing to be a sniper, but are still not accepted, because the thing about a sniper that's a little bit different than any other soldier is you're tasked with killing someone who is not an immediate threat to you. They might be standing there with a friend laughing, but they're in an enemy uniform, and so they're not even holding a gun. Yeah. Let alone pointing it in your direction. But really effective snipers, and they are the enemy. And think about World War II. Maybe that's a colonel or a general who is in direct opposition to us liberating Holland. So make that decision. That person is standing in our way. And if we take them out, even though they're not a direct threat to us, we're going to be able to save all these civilians. That's the really complicated decision-making process. So I'm not talking in the episode about whether or not killing an enemy in the heat of battle is a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's morally ambiguous, and that's really not what it's about. It's about each person's ability to do something which is anathema to human nature, to most people's human nature. And to what extent can you override that? And to what extent should we? It's kind of an open question. And we back that up, right, with some facts and some figures about the crazy numbers in Vietnam and even in Afghanistan, which I've seen numbers between 50 and 250,000 rounds fired for every confirmed kill. That speaks to a lot of suppressive fire. Of just shoot, just everybody open up, and there's somebody over there who has a bomb or a gun. Everybody open up. They're not going to stick their head out. So we're going to keep them at least at bay for a while. Because if everybody was a perfect shot, it would be one bullet per kill, and it obviously isn't. So what is the explanation for that? And I don't think people can find shame and cowardice in that concept if they want to. I do not. I think it makes perfect sense to me.
I do wonder, 100% it should be difficult. I wonder, you were talking about the sniper, I wonder if, as well, and this is something that you would never know unless you ask somebody, if seeing someone through the lens of a scope sort of dehumanizes it a little bit, rather than someone that you can see in front of you in sort of a close combat kind of situation. You were talking about like the Legionnaires and things like that, where you would obviously have to be up close to someone in order to take someone's life.
Yeah.
And of course, that field has lengthened immensely as technology has evolved. I wonder if seeing someone through a scope kind of dehumanizes it to the point where it I don't want to say gamifies it a little bit, but kind of along those lines where it's like it doesn't feel like a real sort of thing.
I think gamify is actually perfect because snipers today probably grew up playing Call of Duty.
Yeah.
So and you could be a sniper in that. So it probably does gamify a little bit. And look, I mean, I think my point with that is that I've read some I don't have them at hand and I didn't end up including them in the episode, but you go through basic training as a soldier and then once you pass basic training, you specialize. So you'll go to a certain type of school if you're communications or intelligence, or maybe you'll just be a grunt, part of a unit where you're doing patrols, part of a platoon. And then there's also a whole separate education that you go through to be a sniper. And like I said, I think that there's some percentage that wash out. I mean, they call it wash out, but basically pass the program but fail it, not because they're not a good shot, but because the assessment is made that they are not going to be proficient at shooting someone who's not an immediate threat to them. Who's a threat in terms of the context of the battle, but not. I think it would be even so. The people who get that far and who are the famous snipers of history are able to do both. They're amazingly technically proficient with a rifle, but they're also willing to disassociate themselves and get past that hurdle, or what I think should be a hurdle, and maybe even a necessary hurdle, depending on who we're talking about. That person is so dangerous and so harmful, either to what it is that we are trying to accomplish, or any army is trying to accomplish, or who is actively ordering the murder of civilians. I don't have any moral opposition to killing that person, because you have to measure one life against hundreds, thousands, millions. But I think it requires a certain type of person to be successful at that. And that's why a lot of people pass the technical tests of being a sniper and fail the psychological, because I think it takes a very specific person. And then you can roll that back and see how that sort of disseminates down to your average soldier who has to look, to level their weapon at someone and say, I know that when I pull the trigger, they're going to die. I don't think that's, I think it's necessary. And like I said, I don't get into the episode about whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, but I don't feel any tension between those two ideas, because
this is why firing squads operate the way that they operate as well. I mean, it's
6 blanks and 1 live.
Yeah, so I mean, it could be genuinely like a mass murderer in front of you. Like, the person could be unequivocally guilty beyond a reason of a doubt. You could have seen them commit these crimes, so they could be someone who is in the court of law, a person who absolutely should be put to death, and still, because they don't want that psychological ramification going through whoever it is that has to pull a trigger, they have, like the 6 blanks and the one live round, and they all fire at the same time. They all aim in the same place. They all fire at the same time. So no one knows who actually shot the person.
And I think that speaks to this idea. Why would that be necessary if most people were fine with killing somebody?
Yeah, I mean, I was offering that as kind of something to support what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think that, so, I mean, I can't account for that, and I didn't feel the need to account for that in the episode itself, but I certainly, I don't use the word cowardice, because I don't think there's anything shameful or cowardly about it taking some time, because I mean, I don't know how these
valuing human life.
Yeah,
There's
and
nothing
it taking
cowardly
some-
about valuing human life.
And look, where do we start, right? We start with World War II, because if you want to talk about a lack of ambiguity about whether or not that was a necessary war, I mean, the Nazis had already taken over most of Europe. They were going to take over or attempting to take over the Soviet Union. They were murdering, I mean, not only Jews, but gypsies and Polish and Russians in the hundreds of thousands and millions. And that was a war that needed to be fought. That's a question that's like war to war. I think it gets more ambiguous when you want to talk about Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. What were those wars for? Especially Iraq, Afghanistan weren't wars against nations, but insurgents. And I don't know, it's very complicated. I don't get into any of that, but if somebody is pointing a gun, if there's an enemy pointing a loaded gun at a group of children, I don't have any moral I think that person needs to be killed so the children aren't.
Yes, but it's for the greater good.
It's for the greater good, but I'm not saying that these things are simple. I'm saying that they're really complex. And I think that that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's the root of it, really, is saying you're not calling any of this cowardice. You're not calling it, a lack of training or anything like that. It is just that these things are so complex, and it is something that is, I mean, you almost have to rewire the way a person's brain feels about life, and that must be such a difficult thing to do.
Well, and I think that there's not that many, so I think that you don't have to go far to locate a soldier who was engaged in that sort of heavy combat, or they saw a lot of people die, killed a significant number of people. They come home different.
Yes,
they're
100%.
changed. So, and I think that they would be the first to admit that. They did what they had to do. But I mean, even people who, I'm a huge fan of the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers. I think it's extraordinary. And part of what I like about that series is that at the beginning of each episode, they interview the men that are being portrayed on the show. And this was made in the early 2000s. So we're talking 60 years on from the event. And you can still see how much emotion and trauma they feel. And that's like like World War II soldiers, like the hardest generation, right? Like they were the best of the best, and especially paratroopers were the best of the best of the best. That was the whole point. And even they, reflecting on an event that happened 60 years earlier, will break down in tears just recounting it. So, and there's nothing shameful about that, because the Nazis and the third, the Reich needed to be stopped at all costs. And it was all costs. It was a huge cost. But I mean, we couldn't.
Well, in a war like that, it wasn't just soldiers involved either. It was largely civilians, as as well, in a lot of these things. That was my grandmother was a nurse in England, and I will forever remember. Till the day she died, she used to say the only good German is a dead one. Yeah. Because she literally used to be at the port as they were bringing the men across the channel, and they were in all states of, limbs missing, bleeding out, anything that was done to them, because they were coming into and she was one of the first to see them. And until the day she died, she said the only good German is a dead one. Do I agree with that? No, of course I don't. But it's something that even for civilians, it was so deeply ingrained with them. I mean, you're talking about the hardest generation, certainly. I mean, 100%.
I don't feel that way about the Germans, but I do feel that way about the Swedes for some reason.
No!
I don't know why. I don't know why. It's sort of
I'm
random.
an eighth Swedish.
Well, then an eighth of you is only good dead to me.
I'm joking.
No, I don't feel that way about the Swedes. Well, yeah, but that speaks to the deep dehumanization. And I mean, I guess if that, I don't know what her experience was before that. Her very first experience with anything any German ever did might have been doing that to somebody that she cared about. So why wouldn't you think that? And you sort of need to. And there's a reason that they would call them like Jerry or Krauts. They didn't know their names, but even, and this again, we're talking about two different things. We're talking about very broad statistics of the number of shots fired to enemies killed, and we also begin with the number of soldiers who even fired their weapons. Yeah,
and this so easily just sort of bleeds into the psychology of war as well, which is just a never-ending discussion that can be had.
It is, but even my point was going to be that even in that context, I'm thinking of a specific instance of what I was talking about in those little cold openings of the Band of Brothers series on HBO. Even those soldiers who killed God knows how many German soldiers, because they're talking to us now on that documentary footage because they made it through. They didn't not kill anybody, but even one of them was even talking about being thoughtful about contextually. He was drafted. Maybe this German that he just killed is drafted. Maybe he wasn't a Nazi. Yeah. Maybe he didn't hate Jews. He doesn't know, but he gets thoughtful about, we might have had a lot in common. Maybe he would have liked to go fishing. Maybe he had a good sense of humor. I never got to find out. That's not the field at which we met. It was different circumstances. And I don't think that there's anything. I think that allowing yourself to go through that process is probably necessary. And maybe your grandmother never got there because of the horrors that she saw. And I don't think either one is right. It's how you have to deal with it. And I think that you don't do that without carrying some scars. And that's all.
I agree.
That was the big thing that I wanted to express, and do it backed up by these figures, but that it's a really difficult thing that they do. And I think that it should be. And I think anything worthwhile is hard. Nothing.
What a soundbite.
Nothing worth having is easy.
Yeah.
Right. So, this is a complicated topic, and I think that you're right, and I think I'm anticipating this, that there's going to be a fair amount of how dare you say that about the soldiers, and I haven't actually said anything about the soldiers. I feel comfortable with what we're expressing in this.
So something that we did differently in this episode is... So for the first, obviously we don't have that many episodes up, but for the first time, and you have said into the foreseeable future, the only time, your voice is heard on this episode.
I don't like it.
So we do have a reading of a poem called The Soldier at the beginning of this episode, and that was something that actually I suggested when I initially read the article for this. We did have me record it, and you put a nice little sort of effect over my voice where it sounded like I was kind of a war widow, and that was how you directed me, was to kind of be a war widow with it. But even after I listened...
people can actually hear that because we post the directed voiceover sessions.
Oh, so of course.
You'll hear us go through several iterations. That is probably the most pure directing that I've done, because you're playing a character. And so we really got, so people can hear that.
Sorry, there's a concrete truck outside, and I just heard it, and it sounded like a bloody elephant trumpet just went off.
That's all right. But I was just going to say that people will actually be able to hear us going through that process.
But I listened to it back. You sent it to me, and I listened to it back, and I just could not get on board with my voice being the voice of this soldier. I just genuinely felt so strongly that it needed to be a male voice in particular, and I also felt so strongly that it needed to be you, just because when I initially heard this poem, it was in your voice. This was years ago when I initially heard this poem. It was in your voice, and it struck me so deeply that it is something that has sat with me for many, many years. And anytime I hear it, It makes me cry. I think you can even hear me like tearing up in that session that we were just where you were having me record it,
Yeah.
which was partially being in character, but partially because, I mean, it does. These words mean perhaps something different to me, but it is something that has like a real deep-seated meaning for me. So it was something that I did suggest to put at the beginning of this episode, and I think it's done real justice by you being the voice of it. I mean, perhaps that's something people can weigh in on. I don't know if they hear the directed session, they'll say, "Oh, you idiots, you should have made it Layla." I don't know.
Well, I think it's interesting
yeah.
in a couple of ways, and yes, this is a poem that's been a favorite of mine for a very long time. I think it's a little bit of a slam. I don't think anyone's going to. I mean, it's called "The Soldier," and it's about the soldier contemplating his own death, and it's very specifically about an English soldier, and
which I will say niggles me a little bit that you didn't even try the dialect.
Well, I was gonna go. I mean, I got one choice when it comes to that kind of an accent. Is straight Cockney. That's really all I can do. I thought that would not really jive with the tone. But in context, I mean that the poem means something to me. It's really just. I mean, I think the entire poem is beautiful, and the thoughts of you can transpose that to any national or whoever you are, but I think that there's something hopeful in it that doesn't necessarily translate or come across on first reading, which is even if I die, I'm going to leave behind a part of that's going to exist forever in the field where I lay dying or where I die.
Mm-hmm.
That part of the field will be forever England. Part of it will be there will be a richer earth concealed there. But I think that the reason that I read it in context and the reason that it spoke to me during the time that you're referring to is I was contemplating a lot about what do you leave behind, and when you're gone, and the first line is what captured me and why I've loved the poem for as long as I can remember, which is, if I die, think only this of me. Almost implanting that idea into the reader's mind, which is, take away from my death this and not some other thing. So in that, I was directing you in character to imagine that you were finding out that you were a war widow during World War II in Britain. I think I had you. What did I say? I said set Mary Poppins level to like 7.5.
Yeah, that's just kind of our code for things, isn't it? Where it's just like, all right, set Mary Poppins to this.
And you know what I mean. We've done it enough that you're like, got it, and I don't have to say
got
anymore.
it. Understood. Yes.
Understood. So people can listen to it. It's a whole. I set up a whole scenario for you to give you the character.
Mm-hmm.
Even your
and that was like oh my God, like a warm Sunday roast for me, because I haven't been directed in that way for so long, and I was like, oh my God, I miss this.
Yeah. And
I miss being a character.
Yeah, I have an instinct for that, and we did it, and I cut it together and really thought it worked, and you didn't at all. I think you really, really disliked it, and then I spent a little time thinking like, well, it might just be that she's being critical of herself, but we talked more about it, and well, we're co-producers, right? So we have a 50-50 say in this. And
it was a little bit, I think, me being critical of myself, but I think it was more for me about the purity of the intention of the words. Like, for some reason, it had to be a male voice for me. And I mean, no slight to you, maybe not even necessarily your voice. I just think it had to be a male voice.
Yeah. I don't know that I think you actually do think it needed to be my voice.
I think for me personally, I think it needs to be your voice. But I think for the meaning of the words and the meaning of the poem to have the appropriate weight, I think for anybody, just in a more broad sense, I think it needs to be a male voice. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad you did it. This may be the only time that you are heard on Almost Certainly Not, but I'm very glad that you did it.
Well, I have envisioned this that yours is the only voice heard, and just because you're the storyteller, but well, I think it was our first real creative. I don't have a better
disagreement,
word than it wasn't. It wasn't actually. It was a conversation, but it was the first time where like I had a very firm opinion and you had a very firm opinion, and we had to come to some sort of common ground. But I think what's interesting too is that I cut that intro with music, with stock footage that I cut and tried to really make very cinematic and with a very specific tone. And then I think that this might have happened anyway, but I might have fucked myself slightly because in order to express to you how I saw it, just on my phone, I very quickly pulled up voice recorder, recorded the poem really quick and dirty, and then cut it in, and showed you what I was thinking, just the tone of it and the how it would look cut to the music and the images, thinking the whole time she can use this as her template. And I remember, and I wanted to ask you this actually, because I didn't ask at the time, because it's not what we were doing. But I said, as we were getting ready to record you doing it, I gave you that example. Do you have my delivery in your head? And you said, I do, but it's kind of worthless to me because you said, referring to me, you have a very specific, like, I think you use cadence.
Yes.
And I was wondering what, like, if you wanted to elaborate on, like, do you think, like, what do you mean by that exactly? Do you think compared to everyone, like, what do you think is specific about the cadence of my voice?
I do think compared to everyone, you have a very specific cadence. I can tell your moods based on the way you speak.
You really can.
I don't know if that's just, it's me because I've known you for so long and I've listened to you for so long. So I don't know if that's specific to me, but you have a very specific just way of speaking. And so I could never imitate your cadence for that poem. I could never. And I wouldn't want to, honestly. But so your delivery was kind of, I don't want to say worthless. That sounds a bit mean, but like it wasn't necessarily worthless, but it's not something that like I can't replicate what you do. So I was
just curious as a voice. I mean, obviously you primarily or almost exclusively you make your living doing voice performing at this point, right?
Yeah, fully exclusively, I do.
So you're like hyper focused on that, and I'm just I don't know, just to scratch the tickle of my own curiosity. Like, what do you think it is about? Is it the word choices that I use, or is it like the way that I actually sound, or both?
It's your pacing. It's the way you say, the way I actually sound. Like it's the way you elongate some words, you truncate other words. It's just very specific to you. The way you speak, the way you say things is very specific to you, and it is something that I could never replicate. Sometimes I'll be reading something, and even when you direct me in the Almost Certainly Not sessions as well, sometimes I'll read something in my voice, in my head, the way that I think that it should be said, and you will say to me, I really want you to lean on this word. Right. And it completely changes the meaning of something, and it's not necessarily the way that Layla would have said it. So I do infuse, I suppose, a little bit of that because that's the way you direct me. And then I kind of have those aha moments when you tell me to do that. Right. But yeah, you have a very specific way of speaking. You think before you speak, which is something that is very unique. I do not. So
I do.
When I am being directed Yes, I think before I speak, when I am being directed, I think. But in just life, I am off the cuff. I am flying by the seat of my absolute knickers. Like, I just say words and then
That's
afterwards go, probably shouldn't have said that.
For our American audience, that means underwear.
But yeah, you certainly have a very thoughtful way of approaching things, and especially for poetry, I think that works beautifully. I've never been a huge fan of poetry because I cannot for the life of me get it right the way that I want it to be. So I've been asked to read poetry previously, and this is coming from someone who is an actress and a singer as well. Like, I was a singer for ages. I suppose for all intents and purposes, I still am a singer.
Prove it.
So absolutely not. That's another episode. Thank you very much. But maybe that could be a perk for a Patreon. I'll sing something.
We could have another companion series called Absolutely Not.
But so coming from someone who is familiar with poetry and has worked with poetry in different forms, I fucking hate the way I sound reading poetry. Like, I've done Shakespeare. I don't enjoy the way that I sound reading poetry. I think it needs a more thoughtful voice, and mine is not always the most thoughtful. I think what serves me as an actor is that I act on instinct.
Right.
But something like poetry is not necessarily based upon instinct. It's based upon thoughtfulness and reflectiveness, if that's even the way to say it. But it's not just not something that I naturally have in my wheelhouse. So I'm very glad that you decided to do it. So yeah, maybe I am more critical of myself for those reasons, because I know that about myself. But I'm glad you did it, and I think it worked out. Are you writing, because you're still writing articles now, are you writing more in my voice? Like, are you hearing me in your head when you're writing these things now? Are you writing them more specifically for the way that we produce? Almost certainly not. Has that affected you at all, or no? Are you just kind of doing the same thing?
I'm still doing it in my voice, but I'm hearing your voice. I'm not writing to your voice. I think as I'm writing, and I think that we talked about this last time we recorded an ACN, which is that obviously I'm putting so much focus into this that my output on new articles has gone down because I have a backlog, and I think that I've just shifted my focus to this. I'm still doing new stuff. It's just a lot more sparse. But the ones that I have done, I'm still writing in my voice, but I can't help but hear yours. And I get sort of excited when I like to achieve a gift of phrase, if possible, in my writing. And I think I get excited.
What do you mean, Kafkaesque?
But if I can achieve that gift of phrase, I get sort of excited / nervous about how I'm going to express the way that I hear it, how it's going to translate. Layering my voice on top of yours is basically the thing that we're doing.
Yeah.
Or vice versa, rather. Layering your voice on top of mine. So I'm not writing to your voice, but I can't help but think about the process that we'll go through, which is actually, Scarlett's my favorite part. Recording with you it's the only part of this that isn't solitary. When I'm editing, when I'm writing.
That was the point of sending me the email and asking if we could do this, I suppose, as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. I guess that's not the only part, because we also, we're talking all the time, and I'm sending you cuts and you're sending me ideas. But as far as like creatively, like for instance, the last episode that we did, and I know that this is a tangent, maybe this will get caught, but the last episode we did will probably end up being, just for people's context and they can hear it, The Man Who Died Twice will probably end up being a 25 to 30 minute episode. And we recorded for like an hour and 45 minutes. And that doesn't include a very long conversation about a different way to end the episode and me like rewriting in real time. You would stop recording.
I
So
know, and I'm absolutely kicking myself for it. I'm never going to do that again because
but
that would have
that
been a great sort of insight into our process and the way that we work.
but that is such a like turns me on so like so much like the collaborate that was a pure collaborative experience, and that is was so collaborative, and then I know that like when we're done, when we got all the audio that I need, when we've talked about the tone and nailed the tone down, you've given me your ideas, then I go into my little hole all alone and have to and then I just have to hammer away at it by myself, and I sort of dread
Yeah.
that. So so but so in addition to that though, so thinking about the way that we're going to achieve their narration, I'm thinking in images as I'm writing now, and how would I be able to express this later. I think eventually, maybe or most likely, that I'll probably leave the Substack as is and start writing for this, and not
Oh,
writing
okay.
articles that, I mean, especially if it continues to trend and people like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this already has 1,000 times more interest than my Substack ever did. So, I guess I could publish them as articles, but I'm starting to, new ideas, I'm starting to think of more as scripts than articles.
Yeah. Well, and you could always post them on perhaps on the website or something like that instead of having it on Substack.
Yeah. But
I
that's
also feel like
bleeding in,
Substack is
definitely.
one of those things that hasn't like really caught on yet. Like I feel like the average person doesn't know what Substack is.
I agree. That's from my numbers, that seems clear. Or they certainly don't know who I am, one or the other. But yeah, so I think that to a certain extent that is happening, but I think that that's also good. I'm careful not to write to your rhythms. I'm writing to
I
my
don't even
own.
know. Do you think you could write to my rhythms? I feel like I'm far more manic than you are,
Well, think about
which is hilarious if
I
people
think
know us.
I think you know that I can, because the monologue I wrote you was your
Oh,
rhythm.
that's true. Yeah, not wrong.
I mean, it was the way I speak or think, but written to your rhythms, which
Yeah.
I had forgotten I had done, and then you were reading
Well,
it
and
out loud to
I
me.
have, perhaps these are also things you can put on Patreon. Like, I have so many scripts and things from you just saved in my email, things that you've sent me, treatments for films. And I mean, we've got a lot of projects between the two of us for sure.
We have.
None of them are mine. They are all yours.
Do you
So I don't know that we have projects between us, but yeah.
Do you happen to have that monologue at hand?
I don't. And I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't even know where to find it. That's something I would have to sort of do a deep dive to try and find again, I think.
Wasn't it? Didn't you just find an email?
I did, but I'm not certain where it is. Let me see.
All right, well,
Did I send it to you?
No, you just told me that you found it and you read snippets to me.
Okay.
But that might be interesting to hear, to record that as an example of something that is in my thinking but written to your voice.
Words but in my voice. Yeah.
So I can do that, and I have done that, but you're still like, I think that you're still like, well, this is still Dan Lauer.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you have a way about you for sure.
Yeah.
So I think we should kind of wrap this one up here, but at the end of the episode, you talk about kind of the utopia of no war, having a world that exists with no war. So my question for you is, what do you think conflict resolution without war would look like? Is there another way?
Well, yes, because there have been. I mean, I think the Cuban missile crisis is a good example of, or the entire Cold War involved diplomacy and brinksmanship. I mean, if you think about it, as much as hard a period as that was, the Cold War is a successful example of that. And the way that we know that is that no nuclear weapons were ever deployed.
Mm-hmm.
And that was about psychology, brinksmanship, diplomacy, and I mean, cooler heads prevailing because it was an idea of mutually assured destruction. I think that's why, I mean, wars, I mean, even wars that are occurring as we speak are occurring. You know, I think that I ended with an explosion with a mushroom cloud, which is sort of universal for a nuclear explosion. And I mean, there have only ever been 2 nuclear weapons deployed in conflict ever, and it's World War II on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The rest of the nuclear bombs or missiles or whatever ever detonated since then have been tests, and probably for intimidation factors. But so, I mean, as aggressive and insane as some people are at the heights of power, I think that there's a reason that I mean, if everyone has nukes, it's like nobody has nukes because it's mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
Is that a good way to go about the avoidance of that type of war? I don't know. I guess, I mean, it could come down to maybe the answer is in the question itself. If that's what it takes to avoid that type of war, I guess that's best. But we end rather on a very, you're right, it's a utopian dream sort of note that the avoidance of wars altogether would avoid this very question. We wouldn't have to focus so much on making sure that people are prepared to shoot to kill, because I mean, I think humanity will have to achieve it's almost sort of a Star Trekian utopian vision of, and I think I'm not like the biggest consumer of Star Trek or even the biggest fan, but I think that the idea of that was the realization that we're not alone in the universe, and suddenly it's not nations against nations, it's a planet, a species, a human species coalescing inside of this greater context in a galaxy. And I think it might even take something that big to unify humanity and avoid these wars. I mean, we have the United Nations,
Like
right?
in Independence Day, the acclaimed film.
I am cutting that. How dare you? No, not like an Independence Day. But I don't know. I mean, we do have those mechanisms. I mean, the United Nations was something that was put into place after World War II. It's not exactly impotent, but practically impotent as an organization. But you know, that's a really complicated. I don't know that there's a simple question or a simple answer to that question.
I certainly do. I could never answer it. That's why I posed the question to you. I mean, I think in my heart of hearts, I think as long as money, as long as religion, as long as anything that somebody can subscribe to wholeheartedly, there will be disagreements on this level. I mean, I don't think that it's possible, honestly.
I don't know, but it certainly is. But you're right about it's also motivational. I mean, what was the Vietnam War actually about? It wasn't about liberating the South Vietnamese from the North Vietnamese. It was about us fighting a war against communism without having a war with Russia. That's all it was about. So it wasn't pure of intention, but so that was a political war. There could be wars about money. There obviously are wars of attrition about religion and other things. And then sometimes there are wars where there is a monster actively killing civilians who needs to be removed for the greater good. And then sometimes those things and sometimes it's all of those things at once. So it could be a completely justified war. But I think that all of the 3 powers, Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union and World War II also saw a little bit of like, hey, we're putting all this effort in. maybe there's a little something something on the back end. It's still a pure war of intention, and Hitler is a monster, and Nazism needs to be stamped off the face of the earth. But we might end up with a couple more, you know, we might have easier access to some products, or, you know, maybe this is we're gonna.
Perhaps. I don't know. I think Britain in the end was self-preservation. I mean, they were just trying not to be invaded.
Well, no, but I think specifically, I mean, obviously that's how the Soviet Union saw it, because the Soviet bloc occurred after that.
Mm-hmm.
And the Iron Wall and East and West Berlin occurred, and the Soviet Union grabbed a lot of territory post World War II. I know that obviously Britain took it. Yes, it was self-preservation, and then there's also there's Chamberlain and appeasement and Churchill, and I mean, we could go on and on and on about whether or not Britain even wanted to get into that war. Kind of, you know, some people thought, well, Hitler's not so bad. We could get on his side and probably avoid this altogether. We're not really up for another war. And I know that there was rationing in Britain for, 25 years, maybe, after World War II. It was rough.
Yeah, it was a long time, yeah.
So, but for the United States, for the Soviet Union, I think that it's possible in wars that it could be about all of those things. And there's going to be a certain amount of opportunism, even if there's a noble goal and it's a justified war. That's people and politics.
It is terribly. Power. It's very complex, much like the subject matter of this episode. But I think the thing is, anytime someone agrees to start a war or fight back, there will always have to be boots on the ground. I mean, I don't know that you can win a war without boots on the ground.
Probably
and that's
not.
Where it kind of brings it back to this like human element. There has to be that first line of defense, that sort of, it sounds terrible, but just that sacrificial regiment, you know?
Yeah.
Which is a horrible, horrible thing to grapple with. Yeah, so I don't know that there is a way to resolve things without war. I don't know that there is any resolution to, and I don't know that there is any resolution to the subject matter of this, which is soldiers abandoning humanity for the sake of, you know, fighting for the greater good. I don't know. It's this whole episode is very complex, and I truly hope people don't jump to conclusions, but I think that they will. I mean, I don't want to preemptively talk about negativity that's going to happen with this episode, but I feel like we might get some on this one. And I really hope people don't take it like that, because it is, I do have respect for people just doing their jobs. And I mean, that's really what it is.
Well, if they do, they've missed the point. And I think we've expressed the point adequately, and so that's their problem, not ours. But I'll just leave you with this because I think that being challenged in what you believe is always valuable if you listen, if you think about it. And I think one of the most complex decisions ever made during wartime was the decision of Truman to deploy the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He knew how many civilians were going to be killed. People who I respect immensely, and I feel like I'm fascinated by war, especially World War II. I've done a lot of reading. I know the horrors of that war. I know intimately the horrors that Japan inflicted upon Taiwan and China. I mean, if people are interested, I'm not getting into it now, but people can look up the rape of Nanking and see just what the Japanese soldiers were up to when left to their own devices, and what was going to be required and how many people were going to die. They did the math. We've taken over everything else, so now we're faced with another seaborne invasion of mainland Japan. how many Japanese soldiers, civilians, and American and British and Soviet soldiers are going to die if we land our boats on Japan versus dropping these 2 bombs, killing this number of people, and forcing a surrender. I have heard people I really respect talk about how that is absolutely morally unjustifiable. And I've heard people that I really respect talk about how there was no other way to do it.
Yeah.
And I respect them both, or those opinions both, and I don't know.
It's a horrible position to be in. I cannot imagine being in a position to make that kind of decision, which I think is on a much smaller scale the position that these soldiers are in as well, having to make those decisions. Like, I cannot imagine being in a position to have to make that decision.
Exactly. And I mean, there's so many components to that we're not going to resolve it here. But I think that's, if you want to shift the idea of aiming a gun at someone to kill them, scale it up as high as you can go. And now imagine that it's not a gun, but it's a bomb. And you're pulling a trigger Truman pulled a trigger in a sense. He approved the bomb drop on Hiroshima. And everybody hoped that Japan would surrender instantly and say, oh my God, they've got this new weapon that can level an entire city. How many do they have? We don't know. So we have to give up now. And they didn't. They didn't surrender. And that's all for all political and empirical reasons and blah, blah, blah. We don't have to get into this. But I just think scale up that idea to how difficult the decision is 1-to-1 to 1 to 50 or 75 or 100,000. And I think that's the question that it's one of those questions that makes us all very uncomfortable, because you're capable of finding opinions that are going to keep tipping you from one side to the other. It's not a simple answer. If you're a pacifist, it is, because you would say that we just should have let Japan do their thing. And nobody not kill anybody. But they were, Nazism and the Third Reich was becoming an imperial power. They took over all the way to France. They took over all of Europe, basically. And Japan was doing the same thing in Asia. They weren't going to just stop. They were trying to expand their empire. And they committed atrocities on the level of the Nazis. They didn't see Chinese as human.
Yeah.
So, but thoughtful people who know what they're talking about, if you listen to them and listen closely, are going to make you question, was that justified or not? I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't have to make the decision. Do I wish that a couple 100,000 civilians didn't need to die for that war to end? Yeah. Was there a better way for it to end with fewer civilians dying? Probably not. So
and that's the hard realization, isn't it? I mean, they call them casualties of war for a reason.
And Japan had already stated their intention, if there was a land invasion of Japan, they were going to fight to the death of the last man, woman, and child.
Yeah.
They were going to let Japan die. So I think on balance, a lot more civilians were going to die if we had not used the atrocity of an atomic weapon on those 2 cities and invaded instead. Who knows? 100 times as many civilians would have. So how do you do the math of that? I don't think that you actually do. I don't think you can boil that down to a calculation. Yeah. And I don't think you can boil down for a soldier, an individual soldier who's in the moment having to make the decision whether or not, do I want to kill this other person? It's not a calculation.
I'm Layla Lawrence.
And I'm Dan Lauer.
And this has been Possibly Not.